Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking with George Tuck, who is a ham radio operator, otherwise known as G4RNI. Now, we were talking about Radio Caroline, how one of their ships got raided, and you were just saying there that the Broadcasting Act came about in 1990.
It came about in 1990, yes. But the actual raid was 1989.
This Broadcasting Act gave the government powers to raid
a ship, even flying under the flag of a foreign state, to my understanding, and carry out whatever is necessary to close it down.
Right. So how did they manage to raid the ship before the legislation was in?
Who's going to contest the government? You've got sort of 4 or 5 DJs and a couple of transmitter engineers on a ship, and maybe a cook. Who's going to do anything about it?
Yeah.
Who's going to fight them?
Yeah.
Where would the money come from?
Good points. Now, you mentioned Lockerbie earlier, and we were talking about this when I visited your radio club a few months back. Now, many people may be aware that there is a conspiracy theory about Lockerbie. A lot of people don't believe Libya were involved and al-Megrahi was innocent, and they faked this cancer situation so that they could avoid a retrial, which was supposed to be taking place, I think, in 2009. And which was going to reveal that this guy was possibly innocent, so Libya weren't involved. So then that begs the question, well, who was involved? And I've got an email here from Neil Sanders, who's been on the show before. I asked his opinion on Lockerbie, and he sent me this email where he says that there is evidence that certain government personnel were warned in advance to cancel reservations on Pan Am 103. At least 2 warnings about a bomb on a US airliner came through the FAA at various agencies in Germany. Here's a partial list of US and South African officials who suddenly backed out of Flight 103 to New York. And it lists John McCarthy, US Ambassador, Stephen Green, Assistant Administrator, Office of Intelligence, DEA, Oliver Revel. So there's a whole list of people, and Bother's entire delegation of 22 people, including General Mallon, Defence Minister, and General Van Tonder, head of South African Secret Service. Now, also on the plane were some CIA agents who hadn't been warned, and they all died in the bombing. And in Neil's email, he actually lists the motive for killing these CIA agents. So there's a whole conspiracy about Lockerbie and whether it was done by the CIA or some other shady group. Now, you suspect that you may have a connection to the Lockerbie conspiracy.
I don't know, but the call sign that I have, the RNI bit, because I requested that one.
G4RNI. You requested that. So this goes back to before
1971 when I heard the ship,
right.
the pirate radio station. And
so
I decided that if I ever got licensed as a radio amateur, that's the call sign that I wanted.
Right. So your call sign is named after this pirate radio station?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was owned by a company called Mebo of Switzerland. Mebo being Meister and Bollier, the 2 owners of the company, which dealt in telecommunications. They were mega anoraks, if you like. They were dead keen on this pirate radio thing. And they set up RNI off the coast of Holland initially with transmitters on various bands. It was thought that in the early days that RNI, the rumour was that RNI was a spy ship for the Eastern Bloc. I'm not sure what you could spy upon from 4 miles out at sea, but there you go. What you could hear through the strength of the transmitters on the ship. I've no idea what you could hear through it, but that was the rumour anyway at the time. But after Lockerbie, after the bomb attack, it was found that there were fragments of a timing device which were allegedly manufactured by Mebo of Sweden. And that seemed to answer a question to me, because in the late 1980s, I had immense problems trying to operate my station. I was getting letters pushed through the door in a Home Office envelope, for instance, saying that my license could be revoked, that I was, in breach of my license conditions. I was causing massive interference to all manner of equipment, and I had to cease transmission.
So this was shortly before Lockerbie?
Shortly before Lockerbie, yes.
Right, and just tell us where you were located as well.
I was in Stanley. I was on top of a hill, probably about 700-800 feet above sea level.
Stanley in County Durham?
In County Durham, yes.
Right, which is not that far from the Scottish border.
No, if you like, I could see down to the Yorkshire Dales, I could see out to sea from there. And aerials, certainly the radio signals on VHF and UHF, would be able to see probably twice that distance. So I'd be able to see radio-wise about a 100-mile radius.
You, at this time before Lockerbie, you were getting all this hassle, and was there an MP?
It was incredible. Yes, there was an MP involved as well.
An MP involved who was trying to get you to stop broadcasting and get rid of your kit?
Yes.
Right. Can you name the MP?
I'd rather not.
Right. Okay. So there was an MP involved, you're getting all of this hassle, then Lockerbie happens, and then you've got...
Suddenly I had no problems anymore.
Right.
It was,
but at that time, you didn't make a connection with Lockerbie at that time?
No, absolutely not. It was only about a year ago I decided to see if Meebo still existed, so I could sort of send them a QSL card, a confirmation card, and say, look, I've got this call sign which used to belong to your radio station, and I put in Meebo into Google, and the first thing that came up was Lockerbie. Right. I couldn't tie it up at first until I read into it that this timing device was allegedly built by Meebo.
So you've put 2 and 2 together and possibly made 5.
Possibly came out with 5, yeah.
You're not sure, but the possible, what you're saying is, what could be true is, let's say...
Some information got to somebody and there was an amateur radio station which may be doing other things, untoward things, so let's get it off the air.
Right. So let's say Lockerbie was pre-planned by CIA, whoever, right? They were probably looking at various things, and someone perhaps knew about you, that you were named after this particular company who was also implicated, or RNI was owned by the company who was possibly involved in making the technology for the bomb.
For the timer.
For the timer, right? So they've perhaps linked you to that company because of your call sign.
Perhaps.
Right.
I don't know. It was just a theory that went through my head. And it answered a lot of questions because I wasn't allowed to have aerials or anything. And then once this all settled down, I was told I could have a mast in the garden and put up whatever I liked. Right. It just didn't seem to make sense at all.
So you think that there would be worries? So let's say you were involved with that company, and do you think they were worried that you were going to listen in on?
I just think that where I lived was in an ideal location to communicate with a receiver about 100 miles in any direction.
Right, which would have...
Certainly up to the Scottish borders, easily up to the Scottish borders.
So you were in listening distance. They were possibly worried that you had knowledge of this particular company. So
possibly, I don't know, but it was incredible at the time, the lengths that the local authority and the government, well, purporting to be the government, went to get me off the air.
Right, and you've still got a lot of that correspondence, I take it?
It'll be in a box in the loft.
Right, right. Now, I've featured on my show in the past, and people have emailed me about woodpecker signals, which are radio signals. Just tell us what you think they are, George, and where they come from and what they're for.
Again, in the 1980s, we found it very, very difficult to communicate on various HF or shortwave bands because of this racket that would appear and cover the entire band. It would kind of go da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da and just go on and on and on and on. When we were told it was a string of high-powered transmitters in the Eastern Bloc, over the horizon radar.
Right. I mean, do you believe that? Do you believe that's what it is?
I don't know what it was, but I also heard rumours that if you recorded it and played it back on the air, that the woodpecker would shift in frequency.
Right. So it
would seem that it was sending out a pulse, then trying to detect what came back after each pulse.
I've heard things like the waves are being sent out in like a grid pattern, and that they can...
Where they cross.
Where they cross. They can activate certain lines and a node, effectively, where they can then cause something to happen at that point, like, I don't know, to heat something up, or to, I don't know, weather modification is another...
I've heard similar things sort of, referred to, like HARP as well. I've heard references about HARP to the same effect.
I mean, I've heard that very low frequency waves are possibly used in weather manipulation. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, it would certainly seem feasible. You pass an electric current through a wire, and yes, air will bend around it as it flows past.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how a microwave works as well, by heat and moisture.
Yeah. Okay, George, now you've got these sets here, and they're highly flexible. So in other words, you can set them at one end of the spectrum, and you can scan them. You can scan right through, can you? or
Well, to a large degree, yes.
now the law says that you're not supposed to listen in on basically 90-odd% of the bands.
Oh, yeah, I'm not allowed to listen to the
but
vast majority of stuff that's in the air.
So the vast majority of stuff that's in the air, if it's not allocated as either a broadcast or a
Well, you're listening to broadcast stations under your broadcast license.
yeah.
And amateur radio, anybody can listen to it, but to communicate, you need the amateur radio license for that.
In
It's
order
a very
to
small
send.
proportion of the...
So anyone can actually get one of these and listen to ham radio.
Anyone can get a shortwave set and listen to ham radio,
Right.
yes, or a scanner and listen to it, yes.
Right. So, but you need the license in order to
To
send.
communicate,
Right.
yes.
All right. Now, your old-fashioned radio set would have a big dial on it, and you would scan from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Yeah.
And I believe that in these sets, you have a little relay in there which switches off the transmitter when you get to a certain frequency that's
That's right, it will
broadcastable.
only transmit on bands we are allowed to transmit on.
So, for example, you get your tuner, and as you come to a band that you're allowed to broadcast on, it'll click the relay on.
Well, it's not broadcast, transmit. We use
Yeah,
there's a fine
okay.
definition between broadcast
Okay,
and
well,
communicate.
it switches the transmitter on so that you can then transmit over that band, and then when you go past it, it switches it off.
switches it off again, yes.
You can hear the relay click in and out,
Yes, or the
Now-
software will switch it off. Yeah.
or the software will switch.
It just
Now,
won't work outside of those
but
bands.
am I right in thinking it's very easy to just take the back off your set and remove that relay?
Some can be done with software, some can be done with removing a diode or a component on the board.
So it's quite a simple modification
Quite often, yes.
to be able to enable that set to broadcast pretty much on throughout a
To
lot of
transmit
this
anyway, yes.
spectrum,
Yes.
right? And I mean, do people do that, or you normally would you just be ostracized and off the air within?
I believe that people do that, yes. I believe that people use them outside of amateur bands.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, very, very similar equipment, looking in different clothes in different boxes, is built for marine radio.
Right.
Outside of the amateur bands, but it'll be very, very similar circuitry inside.
Right. So why would somebody want to transmit outside of the amateur bands?
Well, I suppose people like yourself who might be keen on CB would like a nice big flashy set and powerful set
Right.
to talk on the CB bands.
Right.
With sort of 10, 20 times the power you're allowed to run.
Right. Oh, so the CB band isn't part of the amateur band?
No,
then?
it's a totally separate thing.
I see. So would it allow you to transmit with one of them on CB?
Yes.
Basically, right. Okay. And any other reasons why?
I suppose in extreme circumstances you could use them on a predetermined frequency to talk to someone elsewhere by prior arrangement and tell them anything you want.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And you could, I guess you could interfere with all of the broadcast stuff if you'd wanted to.
We could get close to some of the shortwave broadcast bands, but TV bands and the general broadcast bands, medium wave, the FM band as we call it, they're totally separate bands. We can go nowhere near them. The
Right.
equipment can't do it.
Right. Now, we mentioned digital radio because this is, I mean, it's something they've rolled out over the last, 10 years or something, and it's become more popular, but I don't think
not
it's
taking off the way governments have hoped that it would take off.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people still have, an FM radio in their car, for example. They don't. I don't have I don't own a digital radio. The digital radio, because it's digital, can be more restrictive. Would you agree
Well,
with
if we
that?
go back to how I got into radio by listening to this pirate radio station, I suppose theoretically it would be possible, just like your satellite box, where a particular company delivers programs and you can receive their programs, but not other programs.
Yeah. So in your old analog system, you've just got a range of frequencies.
You've got a range of
and
frequencies, you can go
you
anywhere
scan
you
your
like,
dial
yeah.
and you can see. Basically, you can see everything.
Yes.
Whereas with digital, because
It
it's
could be restricted from manufacture to only receive
yeah,
that
because
which
yeah.
authorities wish you to receive.
Yeah, because you've basically got software in there which is making decisions for you as to you're allowed
That's right.
to receive that or you're not allowed to receive it.
Well,
Time.
theoretically, it would be possible to build a receiver, a radio receiver, that if we went to war with Scotland again,
Yeah.
would only receive English broadcasts in England or
Yeah.
Scottish broadcasts in Scotland. And if you took it across the border, it wouldn't receive the broadcast there, wouldn't receive anything, because it hasn't been told to receive those broadcasts,
Yeah.
hasn't been programmed to.
So you can inhibit it in any sort of way you want to.
I can see no technical reason why it couldn't happen.
Anyone who wants to get interested in get some kit, George, or even maybe try out some kit, How does somebody get involved in ham radio? What's the first? Is there a website people
I
can
think
go
the
to?
first port of call would be the Radio Society of Great Britain site, rsgb.org, and have a look on there. There'll be various field days, various events in various towns at times of year where you can go along. If the Scouts have Jamboree days, we often put on displays there to show people what amateur radio is.
Right, right. And how long does it take to get through these exams? And what sort of level are the exams at? I mean, are they equivalent to a GCSE, or are they harder than that, or what?
It's more fine-tuned than, fine-tuned, that's a good term, I suppose, yeah. It's kind of honed towards a particular subject, which is communication by radio. The initial exam, for the initial license, it isn't too difficult. You need to have a bit of technical knowledge. You need to understand the basics of radio theory.
Yep.
And as you get more into the hobby, you get more privileges. You're allowed to run more power, run on more frequencies and so on. And the exams become more difficult.
Right, right.
But probably the final exam, the full license exam, is about equivalent to City and Guilds.
Right, right, okay. And what's that mean, City and Guilds? Is that like an O-level?
I'm out of my. I'm in a different time warp
Yeah,
here,
I'm in a
Richard.
different
City
time
and
warp
Guilds
as well.
used to be the thing that everybody did when you did an apprenticeship.
Yes.
You would get a City and Guilds certificate at the end of it.
Yeah.
If you became an electrician, you'd City and Guilds qualified.
Yeah, okay.
Now
all
it's
right.
NVQ.
Okay, and George, thanks very much indeed for coming in. It's been very interesting learning about ham radio, although we've probably only just scratched the surface.
Small bit of it. Yeah.
All right, and as RNI used to say at the end of their programs, if you're still listening, please switch off your radio because you're wasting your battery.